The parking lot outside the Iron Wolves clubhouse looked like a graveyard that morning. Rows of motorcycles stood silent in the early light, each one tagged with a small white envelope tucked under the handlebars. 43 bikes, 43 envelopes, and every single one of them now belonged to one man. Marcus Ghost Callahan stood at the edge of the lot, his leather cut hanging heavy on his shoulders, the morning wind pulling at the patches he'd worn for 15 years. In his hand, he held a briefcase. Inside that briefcase were the titles to every motorcycle in the Iron Wolves Motorcycle Club, paid in full. Cash. No questions asked. The brothers were gathering now, emerging from the clubhouse with confusion etched across their faces. Some looked angry, others looked betrayed. But Ghost just stood there, silent as his road name suggested, waiting for the storm he knew was coming, because what they didn't know yet was why he'd done it. What they didn't know was that buying these motorcycles wasn't an act of power. It was an act of war, and the enemy wasn't standing in that parking lot. The enemy was driving toward them right now, with lawyers and court orders and a plan to destroy everything the Iron Wolves had built. But to understand why Ghost did what he did, you have to go back to where it all started, back to the day a broken man with nothing to his name first rode into this club, looking for something he'd lost a long time ago, 15 years earlier. Marcus Callahan wasn't called Ghost. He wasn't called anything. He was just another face in the crowd, working a soul-crushing job at a software company in Austin, Texas, wearing suits that felt like straitjackets, and sitting in meetings that drained the life out of him one PowerPoint slide at a time. He'd been good at it once. Brilliant even, rising through the ranks, making the right connections, saying the right things. But somewhere along the way, Marcus realized he was building someone else's dream while his own was dying inside him. The money was good. The life was comfortable. But comfort, he learned, could be its own kind of prison. His wife had left him 2 years before he found the Iron Wolves. She'd said he was distant, cold, that he'd become a ghost in his own life. The irony of that nickname wouldn't hit him until much later. One Saturday afternoon, nursing a hangover and an existential crisis in equal measure, Marcus walked into a motorcycle dealership. He didn't know why. He'd never ridden before, never even thought about it, but something pulled him through those doors. And 3 hours later, he rode out on a used Harley-Davidson Softail, his heart pounding with something he hadn't felt in years, fear mixed with freedom. The first time he dropped the bike in a parking lot, trying to figure out how to make a slow turn, 3 men in leather cuts pulled up beside him. They didn't laugh. They didn't mock. The biggest one, a mountain of a man with a gray beard and eyes that had seen everything, just climbed off his bike, walked over, and helped Marcus pick it up. "First time?" the man asked. Marcus nodded, embarrassed. "We've all been there, brother." "Name's Roadhouse. That's Preacher and that's Tiny." He pointed to his companions. Tiny was anything but small. "You ride alone?" "Yeah," Marcus said. "I don't really know anyone who—" "Not anymore," Roadhouse interrupted. "You know us now, come on. We'll show you some basics." That's how it started. 3 strangers who became brothers, who taught him not just how to ride, but why people ride. They introduced him to the Iron Wolves, a brotherhood built on loyalty, respect, and the freedom of the open road. No corporate politics, no fake smiles, just straight talk and the understanding that when you wore that patch, you were part of something bigger than yourself. Marcus didn't prospect for long. His intelligence and his calm demeanor under pressure earned him respect quickly. When Roadhouse pinned the full patch on his cut during a ceremony at the clubhouse, the old man leaned in and whispered, "Welcome home, Ghost." The name stuck, because Marcus had been a ghost in his old life, haunting the edges of his own existence. But here, with the Iron Wolves, he finally felt alive. For 10 years, Ghost rode with the club. He worked as a freelance security consultant, just enough to pay his bills and keep gas in the tank. The money didn't matter anymore. The brotherhood did. The roads did. The feeling of rolling into a small town with 40 brothers at your back. knowing that whatever happened, you weren't alone. But then everything changed. It started with a phone call, a lawyer's voice, cold and professional, informing Ghost that his estranged father had passed away. They hadn't spoken in 12 years. His father had been a ruthless businessman, the kind of man who valued profit over people, who'd built an empire on the backs of others and never lost a moment's sleep over it. Ghost had cut ties with him the day he joined the Iron Wolves. His father had called him a failure, a dropout, a waste of potential. Ghost had responded by walking out of his father's office and never looking back. Now the old man was dead, and apparently he'd left everything to his only son. Ghost didn't want it. Didn't want the money, the properties, the investment portfolios. It felt like blood money, earned through the same kind of corporate ruthlessness that had driven him away in the first place. He told the lawyer to donate it all, but the lawyer insisted he come to the reading of the will. There were conditions, stipulations, things his father had specified that required Ghost's personal attention. Reluctantly, Ghost rode to Houston alone and sat in a conference room surrounded by his father's former business associates, men in $1,000 suits who looked at his leather cut and road dust like he was something they'd scraped off their shoes. The will was read. The fortune was substantial, $23 million, plus properties and investments that could easily double that number. But there was a condition. His father's final directive was recorded on a video, played on a large screen at the front of the room. The old man looked gaunt, eaten away by the cancer that had killed him, but his eyes still held that sharp, calculating gleam. "Marcus," the recording began, "if you're watching this, I'm dead. Good, I was tired. But I'm not so tired that I forgot to teach you one last lesson." Ghost felt his jaw tighten. "You ran away from everything I built. You chose a life with those motorcyclists. You threw away your potential to play rebel. Well, son, here's the truth. The world doesn't care about brotherhood. It doesn't care about loyalty. It cares about power, money, control, and I'm giving you all three." The old man leaned forward, his skeleton hands gripping the arms of his chair. "Here's your condition. Take the money. Use it however you want. But you can never give more than 10% away. The rest, you keep, you invest, you grow it. Because I want you to learn what I learned, that no matter how much you run from it, wealth and power will shape you, change you. And maybe, just maybe, you'll realize I was right all along." The video ended. Ghost sat there in silence as the lawyers explained the legal framework. The money was his. He could refuse it, but only if he signed documents that would transfer everything to a corporate trust that would dismantle his father's company and eliminate hundreds of jobs. It was a trap, a final act of manipulation from beyond the grave. Take the money and prove his father right, or refuse it and destroy the lives of people who'd done nothing wrong. Ghost signed the papers. He took the inheritance, and then he rode back to the Iron Wolves, carrying a secret that weighed heavier than any load he'd ever transported. For months, Ghost said nothing. He kept living like he always had. Small apartment, old truck, just enough work to get by. The money sat in accounts he rarely checked, growing silently like a tumor. But the club was struggling. The Iron Wolves had always operated on the edge of financial stability. Their clubhouse was mortgaged. Several brothers had lost jobs in the economic downturn. Medical bills were piling up for Preacher, who'd been diagnosed with diabetes. Tiny's daughter needed braces. Roadhouse was 3 months behind on child support and facing jail time. Ghost watched his brothers stress, saw them take on dangerous work just to make ends meet. He could fix all of it with a single transfer. But every time he thought about it, he heard his father's voice. "Wealth and power will shape you, change you." He was terrified his father was right. Then came the letter. A development company had bought the property adjacent to the Iron Wolves clubhouse. They were planning a luxury apartment complex, and they'd filed a petition with the city to have the motorcycle club declared a public nuisance and evicted. The legal fees alone would bankrupt the club, and even if they fought it, the developer had deep pockets and political connections. The Iron Wolves were going to lose everything. At the emergency church meeting, Ghost sat in the back and listened as the officers laid out the situation. They had maybe 3 months before the legal battles would drain their resources completely. Several brothers suggested they could move, find another location, but everyone knew the truth. The Iron Wolves weren't just a club. They were this clubhouse, this stretch of Texas highway, this piece of ground they'd called home for 30 years. Roadhouse, now the club president, looked older than Ghost had ever seen him. "We'll fight it," Roadhouse said, his voice quiet but firm. "We've been through worse. We'll figure it out." But Ghost could see the defeat in the old man's eyes. That night, Ghost didn't sleep. He sat on the roof of the clubhouse, watching the sun come up over the rows of motorcycles in the parking lot, and made a decision that would either save his brothers or destroy everything they'd built together. Ghost spent 2 weeks working in secret. He hired lawyers, not the corporate sharks his father would have used, but street-smart legal fighters who knew how to battle development companies. He had them investigate the developer, dig into every permit, every city council connection, every potential vulnerability. What they found was damning. The development company had a history of using legal intimidation to acquire properties below market value. They'd done it in 3 other cities, always targeting groups they perceived as weak or marginally legal. The motorcycle club was just their latest victim. But there was something else. The developers' financing was shaky. They'd leveraged themselves heavily to acquire the adjacent property, betting that they could force the Iron Wolves out and flip the combined land for a massive profit. If that didn't happen, if the Iron Wolves property stayed occupied and functional, the developer would face financial collapse. Ghost saw the play, but it required something radical. The developer's strategy relied on one key assumption, that the Iron Wolves' individual motorcycle titles were all financed or held liens from various sources, making the club members financially vulnerable. With enough legal pressure, individual members would be forced to sell their bikes, take on loans, or face repossession. That financial stress would fracture the club from within. Ghost could prevent that. But it meant exposing himself completely. He made the calls, contacted every brother in the club privately, made them an offer they didn't understand. Sell him their motorcycles at full market value, but with the stipulation that they'd continue riding them as long as they remained in good standing with the club. Legal ownership would transfer to Ghost, but practical ownership stayed with the riders. Most thought he was crazy. Some got angry, thinking it was a power play. But Ghost explained it carefully, without revealing where the money was coming from. The developers coming after our finances. They want to squeeze us individually until we break. But if all our bikes belong to one person who can't be financially pressured, their strategy falls apart. Trust me, I know what I'm doing. Roadhouse was the hardest to convince. The old man met Ghost at a diner outside of town, his eyes searching Ghost's face across a table sticky with syrup. "Why?" Roadhouse asked simply. "Because this club saved my life," Ghost said. "And I'm not letting some corporate vultures take it apart. Where's the money coming from, Ghost?" Ghost hesitated. Then, "Does it matter?" "Yeah, brother, it does. Because we're not a charity case. We're not someone's project. If you're doing this out of pity, it's not pity." Ghost interrupted, his voice hard. "It's debt. I owe you, all of you. 10 years ago, you picked up a broken man in a parking lot and gave him a reason to live. This is me paying that back." Roadhouse studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, Ghost, we'll trust you. But if this goes sideways—" "It won't," Ghost promised. He wasn't sure if he believed it himself. The transactions took 3 weeks. One by one, Ghost purchased every motorcycle in the Iron Wolves MC, 43 bikes. From Roadhouse's vintage chopper to Tiny's touring rig to Preacher's stripped-down bobber. The club's lawyer handled the paperwork, setting up a trust that granted riding rights to the original owners while transferring legal ownership to Marcus Callahan. The money moved silently through the system. Ghost didn't flaunt it, didn't change anything about his life. Just lived in the same apartment, rode the same roads, wore the same worn leather cut, but the club noticed things. Suddenly the mortgage on the clubhouse was paid off. Medical bills disappeared. Brothers who'd been one paycheck from disaster found their debts mysteriously cleared. Ghost did it quietly, through anonymous payments and third-party transfers. But eventually, people started putting pieces together. Then the developer made their move. They filed an injunction, claiming the Iron Wolves were operating without proper permits. They sent investigators to document noise complaints, traffic violations, anything they could use to build a case for eviction. They pressured city council members, threatened legal action. But when they tried to apply financial pressure to individual club members, filing nuisance lawsuits, threatening property liens, they hit a wall. The motorcycles, the primary assets they'd planned to target, were all owned by a single individual with resources far beyond their reach. Their lawyers demanded to know who owned the bikes. When they found out it was Marcus Callahan, they ran a background check and discovered exactly who his father had been. The developer's CEO called Ghost directly. "Mr. Callahan, I think we got off on the wrong foot. I'd like to discuss a business proposition." Ghost cut him off. "No, you haven't heard my offer. I don't need to. You're trying to steal my brother's home. There's no negotiation. You're brothers." The CEO's voice dripped with condescension. "Mr. Callahan, you're a wealthy man playing dress-up with a motorcycle gang. Surely you understand." "I understand you have two choices," Ghost said quietly. "Walk away, or watch your company collapse under the weight of the lawsuits my attorneys are preparing. We've documented every shady deal you've made, every bribed official, every building code violation in your other projects. You want a war? I've got the resources to fight one that'll last years." There was a long silence. "This isn't over," the CEO finally said. "Yes," Ghost replied. "It is." He hung up. The morning Ghost stood in the parking lot with the briefcase of titles. The brothers thought he'd betrayed them. That's what it looked like from the outside. A rich man who'd bought their dignity, turned them into dependents, proven they were nothing without his money. Roadhouse was the first to speak, his voice heavy with disappointment. "What the hell is this, Ghost?" "It's protection," Ghost said simply. "Protection?" Tiny stepped forward, his massive frame tense with anger. "You bought our bikes. You paid off our debts. You think that makes you our savior?" "No," Ghost said. "It makes me your brother, which is why I did what brothers do." He opened the briefcase. Inside, neatly organized, were all 43 titles, and beneath them a stack of legal documents. "The developer backed off yesterday," Ghost continued. "Their financing collapsed exactly like we predicted. They're selling the adjacent property at a loss and withdrawing all legal action against the club." Murmurs rippled through the gathered brothers. "But that's not why I called you here," Ghost went on. "I called you here because you deserve to know the truth." He took a breath. 15 years ago, I walked away from a life that was killing me. I found you, this club, and you gave me something I thought I'd lost, a purpose, a family. When my father died 5 years ago, he left me everything. Millions of dollars, a fortune I never wanted and didn't ask for. The brothers stared at him in stunned silence. I kept it secret because I was afraid. Afraid it would change things. Afraid you'd see me differently. Afraid my father was right when he said wealth would corrupt everything it touched. But then I watched you struggle, watched you sacrifice, watched you face losing this place, and I realized something. Ghost's voice grew stronger. Money isn't power, it's a tool. And like any tool, it depends on who's wielding it and why. My father used his wealth to control people, to prove he was better than everyone else. But I don't want to be my father. I want to be the man you helped me become. He pulled out the title documents and began handing them back to their original owners. "These are yours. They were always yours. The paperwork was just temporary, just long enough to protect us from the legal attack. Now it's over and I'm giving them back." Preacher took his title with shaking hands. "Ghost, we can't accept this. The money you spent wasn't mine to keep," Ghost interrupted. "It was blood money, built on greed and manipulation. But you know what? Watching that developer's face when he realized he couldn't break us, knowing that my father's money, used the right way, protected the only family I've ever really had. That's the best revenge I could ever get." He turned to Roadhouse. "You picked me up in a parking lot 15 years ago. Told me I wasn't alone anymore. You gave me a home when I was lost. This," he gestured to the documents, "this is just me returning the favor." Roadhouse's eyes were wet. The old man pulled Ghost into a crushing hug. "You crazy son of a bitch," Roadhouse whispered. "You beautiful crazy son of a bitch." One by one, the brothers came forward. Some hugged Ghost, some just gripped his shoulder. All of them understood what he'd done, what he'd risked, and why. "So what now?" Tiny asked, wiping his eyes. "You're a millionaire biker." "That's gotta be a first," Ghost laughed, the tension finally breaking. Now I keep doing what I've been doing. Riding with my brothers, living free, and maybe, just maybe, using this money to help other clubs that face what we faced. Turn my father's weapon into something good. The Ghost Foundation, Preacher suggested. Has a nice ring to it. Maybe, Ghost said. But that's future talk. Right now I just want to ride. Roadhouse grinned, his old spirit returning. Then what are we standing around for? Mount up, brothers. We've got roads to cover. The Iron Wolves rolled out of the parking lot that morning, like thunder made manifest. 43 motorcycles, 43 brothers, riding in formation down the Texas highway with the sun at their backs and the wind in their faces. Ghost rode in his usual position, middle of the pack, neither leading nor following, just part of the flow. His father's money was gone now, most of it transferred to legal funds, medical trusts, and a foundation that would help other motorcycle clubs fight corporate bullying. He kept just enough to live on, just enough to stay comfortable, but not comfortable enough to forget where he came from. Some people said he was crazy for giving it away, that he'd thrown away a fortune. But Ghost knew better. His father had been wrong about everything except one thing. Wealth does change you. It shows you who you really are. And what Ghost learned was that he'd rather be rich in brothers than rich in dollars. That the only fortune worth having is the one you share. That freedom isn't about having everything. It's about needing nothing except the road, the bike, and the people riding beside you. The developer sold the adjacent property to a veterans non-profit that turned it into affordable housing. The Iron Wolves clubhouse stood solid, its debts paid, its future secure. And on quiet nights, when the brothers gathered around the fire pit outside, they'd tell the story of the biker who became a millionaire and bought all the motorcycles in the club. Not because he wanted power, but because he wanted to prove that sometimes the best revenge against a cruel world is kindness, that the strongest chains are the ones forged by loyalty, not money, and that real wealth isn't measured in bank accounts. It's measured in the number of people who'd ride into hell beside you if you asked. Ghost never talked much about that time. When brothers brought it up, he'd just shrug and say, "We take care of our own." That's the code, and it was. The oldest code there is. The only one that really matters. Brotherhood. Years later, when Roadhouse finally retired and passed the president's patch to the next generation, he made sure to tell them Ghost's story. Not as legend, but as truth. As a reminder of what the club stood for and what they'd fight to protect. Money comes and goes, Roadhouse would say. But brothers are forever. And when you find a brother who'd give up everything to protect you, you hold on to him, you ride beside him, and you never forget what he taught you about what really matters in this life. Ghost rode with the Iron Wolves until his final day. He never became president, never sought recognition or glory, just lived his life the way he'd always wanted, free, loyal, and surrounded by family. And when the time came, 43 motorcycles formed a procession that stretched for miles, not to honor a millionaire, but to honor a brother, a man who'd learned that the greatest fortune you can inherit is the chance to choose who you become. And Ghost, he chose to be exactly what he'd always been, from that first day in the parking lot when Roadhouse helped him pick up his bike. He chose to be home,